While we sleep, the guardians of the night take to the streets, having said goodbye to those they love. Each other knowing they may never say these words again, they face the evil that we run from. They dedicate their lives to those that would hate them because they wear the badge. They wear the badge not for the glory or recognition, but for the passion to help others. This is the LEO First Podcast. We'll talk to the men and women in law enforcement, those that have retired, those that keep the prisons secure, and anyone who's impacted by law enforcement. We'll peel back the curtain, and you'll get the real stories. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Every law enforcement officer has a story to tell. Get ready to hear from the men and women who put their lives on the line every day for their communities and their country. Welcome to the LEO First Podcast. Now, here's your host, Michael Laidler.
Hey everybody, it's Michael Laidler, host of the LEO First Podcast, and welcome to another amazing episode. We have a very special guest tonight, and he was so nice to me. We was actually supposed to start this recording an hour ago, but due to me having some added pressures from taking my son back for a different weekend, we were able to record this a little bit later. But that's the kind of person that I know that we're going to have on tonight. He's adaptable. He's a leader. He understands that sometimes when things come up, you do have to pivot. And that's what we already had to do just to get this show going. But I can tell you guys won't be disappointed. He's been very vocal. He's been very supportive of this podcast. He leaves comments, likes, like I hope you guys do as well. But to show how much he believes in what we're doing. You guys know all the people we have on here, it's always about supporting law enforcement, humanizing the badge, letting the public know that we're people even outside of the uniform, and letting ourselves know it's okay to be human. And I can tell you our guest tonight, he's going to be no different. He's going to tell you different things that he's been through with over 2 decades, nearly 30 years of law enforcement under his belt in different avenues. I promise you're going to be in for a treat because of what I've seen in his profile and just what I've talked about with him so far up to this point. You guys know I like to ramble a little bit, but I'm going to stop my rambling right now and introduce our guest tonight. And if you see me looking down, I told him I would not mess up his name. It's not the most common name, and I'm sure he's going to explain the heritage side, but I definitely wanted to make sure I was being respectful to getting it correctly. So his name's Randall Doizaki. There you go. I said it right the second time.
Yeah,
but he's definitely our guest tonight. And Randall, without further ado, without Michael Laidler making any more mistakes, which I don't mind, but I try to avoid them. Tell us about you. Who is Randall?
Well, first, Michael, I'd say thanks for having me on your show. And I don't look at it as a mistake. It's always a learning opportunity.
It is.
The more we do, the better we get. If you repeat it, then it becomes a mistake. So in a nutshell, Michael, like you said, I've been watching your podcast. I'm very impressed with the guests you've been having. In a nutshell, I'm career public service. I knew in high school I wanted to go in the Marine Corps. I signed up, delayed entry. So when I graduated high school in June of that number of years ago,
okay, all right,
I went to the Marine Corps 2 weeks out of high school. I did 4 years in the Corps. I loved it, had a great time. Came back home. A year later, I married my high school sweetheart. I've been married 36 years, same wonderful woman, very patient lady. She supported me in my career in law enforcement. But after my tour in the Marine Corps, I got out, did a number of other professions. I was a manager, firewater restoration, did sales, construction. I used to walk steel, walk metal buildings. I was a foreman out at DIA, number of food plant sanitation. They actually sent me as a Marine to Manhattan, Kansas, American Institute of Baking to become a sanitation supervisor. I was doing good in the job, but I wasn't happy. So I went into law enforcement, went through the academy at ACC here in Colorado, Arapahoe Community College. And that was back in 93 and 95 when I completed my associate's degree. I was testing with Denver PD, Jefferson County Sheriff's Office, and Arapahoe County Sheriff's Office. And all three at that time, the challenge was there were more applicants. There were thousands of people applying for jobs. Now it's the other way around in law enforcement. Now they can't fill the positions. Mm-hmm. When I went in to test with Denver PD, you were a number. You were one of the 1,000 people being interviewed. Mm-hmm. And you were strictly a number. And I've seen things change so much, so drastically, especially here in Denver area. You know, my friends and my circle of contacts, and I watch things. But in my time in the sheriff's office, I was a little bit older when I started. I was 31 when I started the sheriff's office. And I determined where I wanted to be at retirement. I identified my goal was to be a captain when I was ready to retire. So I started backwards. And I would tell officers when they come on board, identify where you want to be at retirement. I got tired of officers coming to me and saying, hey, LT, here's my letter I want to put in for this. And it closed that day. And
that's not planning.
I tell them this letter's crap.
Yeah.
They said, yeah, I just decided. So, well, that's not going to cut it. So I worked backwards on where I wanted to be. So I did 3 years in the jail as a deputy, went to patrol for 3 years, went to investigations, made sergeant, went back to the jail for a year and a half, back to investigations for 6 years as a sergeant. While I was assigned in investigations, I was the evidence custodian, peer support coordinator, sergeant for the hostage negotiation team, critical response team, investigating officer involved shootings, peer support, training committee, employee of the month. I was president for Colorado Association of Private Evidence Sec 2008. I can't remember what else I did, but then left the investigations, went back to the jail as a sergeant. 2 years later, made lieutenant. I retired with 6 years under my belt as a lieutenant in the jail. A couple of stints as the acting captain, a lot of different duties. I was the coordinator for the RISE program, which is Restoring Individuals Safely and Effectively to Competency. And that is a program run by the State Office of Behavioral Health. So instead of going to a state hospital, they would be housed in Arapahoe County Jail. And I worked directly with the psychologist and the therapist and the mental health team, trying to restore these individuals to competency just for trial. It had nothing to do with the original case. It was a challenge, and it was a shift in our thinking. You've got law enforcement that are housing, and you've got mental health workers side by side. They refer to them as patients. When we say inmate, they say patient, and it didn't always work well.
Correct.
But I learned a lot from that. I am currently a coach with Performance Protocol, law enforcement coaching. I am working on setting up my own business, doing leadership development, coaching, training, getting ready to publish my book, Beware, it's about leadership, not management. Taking my 30 plus years of law enforcement leadership experience and putting it in for the next generation. We have to identify what we're doing today to find who those replacements are going to be tomorrow. When my retirement came up with Arapahoe County, I identified 3 sergeants to mentor and guide to take over and become my replacement. Mm-hmm. In one of the articles I've written and prepared, I just actually posted on LinkedIn, it's talking about developing employees from the recruiting, from the hiring. I don't see enough of that. I see people come in and we're not incorporating them at the front end. And in law enforcement, they can become so dissatisfied. The challenges of the job and being blunt about it, the crap we have to deal with. So now that I'm in work in school safety and I'm seeing more crap come in and I'm thinking about the wear and tear. So we like to laugh and joke and have some fun. And it's such a serious profession. If we don't look out for ourselves and each other, that's when we end up in trouble. We end up going down that path. You know, I remember starting out, and I'll say growing up in law enforcement over my career, because it definitely is a growing and maturing trip, is thinking back to laughing and joking. Yeah, going to go party. That doesn't cut it anymore. You can't, that kind of lifestyle will eat somebody up. if they're not careful about it. And for me, it goes back having that tough conversation, even with my lovely wife, and looking at the wear and tear it has on me. I've had physically, Michael, I'm falling apart, 3 shoulder surgeries, a couple of hand surgeries, wow. The physical wear and tear in the body, and then the fatigue that it creates. And you watch people age so quickly in law enforcement. Mm-hmm. I had a deputy who worked for me, started in 2001, 2002. He was a brand new deputy, young guy. And he's now the bureau chief out there in Arapahoe County. He went from deputy, became a investigator, worked internal affairs, sergeant,
right,
made lieutenant, made captain, and then now he's a bureau chief for the jail. And you watch it, but I've watched him age. He looks almost as old as I am. And you just watch the wear and tear on their bodies and the stress. So what do we do for fun? So the question for you, Michael, what do you do for fun? I know you travel, you get out with your son.
I think we're looking at it and hearing it right now. You know, I tell people that when they ask me, what do I do for fun? What is my leisure time? I say, I start public speaking. And they're like, what? Mm-hmm. What do you mean public speaking? And I'm like, yeah, I said, that's therapeutic for me because I get to speak on what I want to talk about. And it's usually obviously at the hope that I can impact others, but kind of like you, one of the things that I found out happening early on in my role as a speaker, law enforcement officer, father, spouse was there's not enough building from within. So we're always looking to expand externally. And it's funny, one of the things you talked about early on in your introduction, and it brought me back to a point back to 2015 was you talked about starting backwards, finding where you want to be. For example, like that one deputy you talked about, a bureau chief. So if you say when you start off, hey, I want to be a bureau chief, how do you get there? Don't wait until the roles open up. So I had a conversation with he ended up being a director of the prison system. He was my warden at the time. And that's conversation. We sat down. He was like, Michael, where do you want to be 25 years from now? And I was like, well, this is where I want to be. And he was like, well, how do you think you're going to get there? So from that point on, although I was number wise, probably about 15, 20 years away from that, I knew all the benchmarks I had to hit. So for you, when you've been mentoring and coaching and things that you've seen so far, if you were coaching that brand new sergeant, for example, that that was considered a high riser, what are some things you would tell him or her right now to start motivating them to prepare for that future career that they're looking for?
Well, for me, a lot of times when I'm talking with individuals about where they want to go, we have to look at what it's going to take to be successful in those positions. Mm-hmm. We can tell somebody to get a degree. I have a bachelor's in applied management, and I got a master's in organizational leadership and HR because law enforcement, how much criminal justice can you take? And when you get to that executive level, it is about organizational structure and operations. Mm-hmm. So using it as a basis, and we start there, but we also have to start with the individual. When we're looking at new officers come in, we try to identify a skill set they have that we can build on. How do you develop that? Are they an informal leader among their peers? Are they more of an introvert? I've individuals I've worked with that wanted to be put in for patrol or sergeant, and I flat out would not sign off on their memo. I said, you've got to demonstrate the leadership skills. Mm-hmm. You've got to demonstrate those communication skills, those interpersonal, that emotional IQ, equity, the equity issues and everything that's incorporating into it. And I use myself as an example. I laugh and joke about my age. I am actually a certified personal trainer, as a trainer at a gym for a period of time. And I became a certified trainer because I learned to lift weights in high school in the Marine Corps. Us Marines are always about, crazy testosterone crap. Marines, we go charging in, and it's all about mass, and that's what's led to my body being so beat up.
The heavier, the better.
But I went in and I said, okay, what do? I need to learn to do it right. So I went and became certified. Mm-hmm. And then one of the guys I was working with at the gym, he said, "Hey, you got your certification. We'll hire you as a part-time trainer." I said, "Okay." So I was doing that, and I was working with them. But even on the emotional side, the personal side, I'm not a very touchy-feely guy. I'm not a very emotionally supportive. And like you hit on when you're talking about being a spouse, a father, for me being a sibling, and being a son, and so on. So I'll ask you a question, and then I'll answer it myself.
Okay.
Why did you put the badge on?
For me, it started out back when I was a kid. The O.J. Simpson trial. That's where it started for me. Literally, and I tell people all the time, they're like, "Wait, what?" I'm like, "Yes." It was actually the O.J. Simpson trial. It was in like June of '94, and I remember watching the chase, watching the trial, watching the testimonies, watching the evidence being presented. And from that point on, I always wanted to be a homicide detective in LA. I never got to that part, but that's where the passion started with me. And some of that was serving people. It was making the community better. It was probably the excitement of it too. So when I started to aim for that, I took classes in high school. I started in college that way. And then I became an officer at 19. So then I quickly developed that next skill set of like, okay, what am I going to do next? And I had no direction. I didn't have any mentors like that. I didn't have any guidance. I mean, I didn't have anybody bad telling me to do anything wrong, but I didn't have that person like yourself where you're like, hey, think backwards early, like start planning this. Because honestly, I think if I would have probably never left that agency. But because I was just kind of out there throwing the darts out and to see what stuck, it's what got me to where I'm at now. And I've learned a lot and I've experienced a lot. That's why I'm able to do this podcast, YouTube videos, all that stuff. So for me, I put the badge on because early on when I was a kid, I felt that passion to help others. I felt that drive to just grow myself and learn about the criminal justice system from the law enforcement standpoint. And for me, it was always a challenge to kind of get to that level. And then once I got there, I kind of became stagnant and I was like, okay, what else can I do? But the initial drive was, how do I make people safer?
So kudos to you for your passion, your interest. That was like me going to the Marine Corps. I was a scrapper. I was always in fights growing up. I was a little bit of a hothead, and I wanted to fight. So I went to the Marine Corps, and I knew 6 months in advance what I was going to do. So I put the badge on, and I'll start it with a story about an 11-year-old boy whose family was held hostage. And my mother was taken to the door with a gun in her ribs. To this day, I remember the thing that's most profound for me is my dad sitting between the dining room table and the wall with my 2-year-old sister on his lap. I was 11, and he couldn't do anything to save his family. Now, my dad used to own, he's a partner in a bar here in Denver. He'd been robbed. He'd been in fights and a number of things. My dad was a hard individual, great man. But watching what he was facing and not being able to save his family. So I jumped forward a few years, about 12 years. Newly married, less than a year. Individual goes in to rob a bank. And he's a serial bank robber. So the bank has a plainclothes off-duty officer there. Guy comes in, robbed a bank, turns and points at the officer. Officer shoots and kills him. Had he come in 5 minutes later, my wife would have been gone. Wow. My wife was the bank teller where he got robbed. So it was 2 incidents in the family. So being the Marine I am, the sheepdog, and it may be an overused phrase, but the concept, I am the consequence for them.
Let me jump in there. So Randall, it's funny you talk about the sheepdog, and when I started law enforcement in 2005, I remember with like Lieutenant Grossman and the whole bulletproof mindset and sheepdog, that was talked about a lot. Now I barely hear it. So sorry, it popped in my head. So do you think that this is gonna be an interesting question because I'm coming up with it as I'm sitting here.
That's okay. Bring it.
Yeah. Do you think that we're now teaching our officers to not be the sheepdog that we used to be taught back in the early 2000s?
Well, I think the concept of the sheepdog itself has changed. I was just watching a video on LinkedIn today about a law enforcement officer somewhere. I can't remember where it was. And he's facing off with an individual with a knife in a hospital. And they clear the hall. The officer's talking to him. The officer's doing the de-escalation. And we see more of that. When I was a sergeant a couple of decades ago, the joke in the team always was, well, when there's a fight, where's the sergeant? I'm usually on the bottom of the pile because somebody squares off. I'm jumping in there, you know, and my wife, my daughter walk away from my gun sign. If I take my glasses off more in public, it's going to get ugly because I don't play around.
Yeah.
But that mentality of jumping in, and I think the concept of sheepdog is there. We just don't refer to it because I think it's a little overused and
aggressive.
In some senses, it could be a little biased too if you look at some of the concept with it. And you know, the mentality of de-escalation. So there's an individual, and I'll throw out a name for you. I don't know if I've shared his name with you, Jeff Santilli. Jeff does CIT, and I'll share his name, his information with you on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Jeff is he was the Air Force. He's former State Patrol, former Douglas County Sheriff's Office. He runs a CIT class. So he's teaching CIT, but it's expanding beyond law enforcement to the public sector. He's being asked to reformat that material for the private sector. So I think the concept of sheepdog is there. It's just not as aggressive of an image. You know, we're not out there, and not that a sheepdog is. I'm a Rottweiler guy. I've got a Rottweiler German Shepherd. But you come in my house, don't worry about the man with the gun. Don't worry about the badge. The dog will take care of you. All I got to do is get rid of the body. But no, I just let the dog chew on you for a little bit. But if you look at that concept, but it's the same thing with CIT. You and I probably have been through verbal judo classes. We've been through de-escalation classes.
Absolutely.
So I just told him I'll call him back. I don't know who's trying to call me. But the way they change things and they relabel it. So I think the mentality is there. There's another individual out there, Vinny Montez.
No, comedian.
Yeah.
He's out of Colorado, right?
Yeah. Phenomenal guy. But
I need to get him on the show.
Oh, he'd be great.
Yes.
Vinny would be awesome. Yeah. He comes out and he talked about the new generation, and they say they're checking Siris that say, hey, Siri, how do I deal with a meth head? You know, we're like, you don't have time to check your phone for this. So I think the concept is there. I don't think we are emphasizing it as much. I think the underlying concept, but then again, the training and material that is coming out, the differences, and I kind of tie it in with a little comment I made initially when we first signed on. I'll ask you what my family heritage is. What is Doizaki? What's the heritage?
So, all right, tell us, what is the heritage? Doizaki. Yes, I got it.
It's actually Japanese.
Tell us about that.
So my grandparents came to the United States, late 1800s. The Doizaki name goes back to the 1600s in Japan. And so they grew up, my dad grew up on a farm out here in Brighton, Colorado, in a Japanese community. So I grew up in a Japanese Buddhist home. So I actually used that in the classroom, and I asked people what I just asked you, and I talked to them about it, and I try to bridge that gap on the biases and everything we bring, because 20 years ago was never an issue.
Correct.
20, 30 years ago, you know, I was growing up getting picked on because my Japanese last name. I was in more fights because of that than anything. But I used it in the classroom, and I said, my family heritage. Now, my mother remarried. My biological father is German. My mother's Irish Norwegian. My wife's parents are from Naples, Italy. So I was raised Buddhist. My wife's Catholic. I'm also a Mason. Go figure that out. My older brother and his family are Mormon. My wife's cousin is Jewish, and his wife's family is from the Middle East. So we're looking at the mix, and that would never have been a thing 20 years ago. So you look at how the dynamics have changed and in our interactions and what we look at. So I don't think the sheepdog concept is gone. I just don't think we package it that way or we talk about it that way anymore.
I don't know if society can handle it like that, like it used to. Like and it's sad because it's so funny because I didn't really think about the whole sheepdog thing. I've referred to Bulletproof Mindset and Lieutenant Grossman. I've talked about Dr. Gilmore, and like I call them kind of like the OGs of kind of like professional speaking and some of the concepts we have. And people are like, wait, what do you mean? I said, go look at them. I said, some of the things that we talk about now has actually been talked about 2 or 3 decades ago at a mainstream level. It's just that it wasn't popular. But sheepdog, that whole Bulletproof Mindset was really strong for about 2 decades. But now you're right, it's repackaging. But I wonder if you had a debate, and maybe I might try to set this up. If we had a debate with a sheepdog mentality and a de-escalation mentality, I wonder how that will go, because you know what I mean? But it's something to think about, because it's like for like me and you, what we're talking about, like our trainings are completely different than what it was 20, 30 years ago. But you have people still in the profession trying to battle that, because when I say, I mean, I'm 18 years in, but I can tell you heavily from 05 to almost 2015, it was sheepdog type mentalities everywhere I went. So my foundation is that I've been able to adapt. So de-escalation, I can do just as easy, but I have to be able to look at both sides, because there's people that were indoctrinated in sheepdog longer than I was. How do I take that and help them adapt? Because it's tough. Like, you've been doing law enforcement in a certain way with we're going to go take care of business. We don't got time to be asking all these questions versus now, like, hey, let's slow down a little bit. Let's not kick the door in right away. Let's not put cuffs on the person, although they might be posing a threat. Maybe we can give them some more verbal judo and talk to them, because the mentalities are kind of night and day in a sense, but we see where we need it. Like, I understand completely why we have to adapt, but do you think that if we put those two mentalities in a room, like how do you think that conversation would go? Like, you have that de-escalation instructor, then you have that sheepdog mindset instructor.
So I'll use an example we had. In the RISE program, we had an individual that attacked one of my deputies. Now, this deputy was like 6'2", 6'3", 3¼ pounds.
Oh, yeah.
Big deputy.
It's like he's corn-fed.
Yeah. Him and the inmate, they're just going to town. And the second deputy comes in. The second deputy's about 6 foot, 2¼ So you got almost 700 or almost 600 pounds meat between the two deputies and the one guy that was on the inmate that was a little over 200 pounds. And the more they fought, the more he resisted. The more he resisted, the more they applied. So the deputy pulled out, used a taser, did a drive stun. And the drive stun, just a 2 points contact, like on his thigh or something like that. And his hands went straight out. The mental health team that we were working with from the State Office of Behavioral Health, they had a fit that we used a taser on their patient. And trying to get that concept, I said, the fight was over as soon as they deployed the taser. But I said, if you go back, and I'm sure we could find the data, that the longer the fight goes, the more likely it is for somebody, one of the three, to get injured.
I could see that. I can support that.
I
can dig that.
The likelihood would be him, because he's got 2 deputies and he can't fight on both fronts. So the deployment of the taser, just 2 prongs to his thigh, stopped the fight. So again, it's that mentality, and I'm all for it. I enjoy those conversations. That's how we learn. I currently work with our mental health team where I'm employed at, and we talk ad nauseum about some of this, about the mental health. But even when I'm talking and training officers now, there's more of a mindset. When I talk to officers, it's why are you standing there? I tell officers, and this is one of the presentations I do, I talk about you as an officer are a bully. You go into somebody's house in uniform, wearing a badge, you're telling the person what to do, where to sit, shut up in their own house. So why do we come in with that? We're putting in an automatic adversarial position. Right. And that's one of the things we run into with the students we're dealing with today. And I tell the officers, why are you standing over that student talking down to them? Mm-hmm. If you can talk to somebody, even in law enforcement capacity, sit across from them, sit down, come to their level. Don't go in. There's a time and a place to go in there and take charge. Absolutely. As the Marine, I just like, you let the Marines loose, we're going to destroy everything.
I have a lot of friends in the Marines, so unfortunately, you're not wrong at all about that. Not at all.
Well, it's like we laugh and joke about, a bar fight. Most people are trying to get out. The cops are trying to get in, and I always say the Marines probably started it anyway.
You're right. Hey, but with that group, they're coming. They're coming no matter what. I can promise you that they're always coming.
The unit I was stationed with in Hawaii is Marine Barracks Hawaii, and in 1-3, I went on deployment out of Kaneohe to the Far East back in the 80s. We got banned from a number of clubs, including the enlisted club in Pearl Harbor. We couldn't go back there. But you look at the mentality and what we bring into the job, and it's not the same anymore. I mean, we're not hook 'em, haul 'em, and drop 'em. There's a lot more that goes into it, and even for me as a patrol deputy, and I'm going to date myself here because when I started on patrol, we used to do handwritten reports. We didn't have the MDTs.
I haven't seen a handwritten report in a while. I remember doing some traffic crashes like that. So it's been a while though.
But I had a recipe card box in my patrol car, and I had little FI field interview cards for all the juveniles I contact in my neighborhood. Yeah. And I would keep track of them. I'd go in and I'd check in on them, say, hey, how you doing? I get invited to graduation parties, neighborhood events, and stuff like that. So I think we were doing some of that back then. I think even prior to you and I being on the street, I think there was a lot of that going on. We just didn't treat it that way. We didn't see it as the entity. We just saw it as community policing. Right. We saw it as going out. Proactive. So now there's more of an emphasis to do what we've always been doing. The verbal judo and the trainings we do, the de-escalation trainings, and how many different names they've had, up to the CIT training, which has been around for a couple of decades, and the 4-hour block of training. And I've seen people crying, both the role players and the participants crying in these scenarios, because it is. So we've been doing it, but I think we just kind of got away from the mindset that sometimes you gotta sit there and guard that door, and not to speak ill of myself here, but I would sit in interviews hiring new officers, and I would ask them, and it used to get me in trouble. I will openly admit, HR didn't like me.
It's like, you're getting nudged by HR. Don't say that, Randall. Don't say that.
Pretty much. Yeah. I would have to ask them. I'd say, yeah, one last question. Have you ever been in a fight in your life? And they're like, oh, crap, he did it. And they'd sit there, well, yeah. I said, no. I'm not talking a little slap me fight. I'm talking a get your butt kicked. You ain't getting up. You're not walking away from it fight. No, not really. I said, well, it's coming. It's got your name on it. Be ready for it.
Well, yeah. I mean, but hey, Randall, it's funny because like when I still do training with, like, we call them correctional training officers, field training officers, things like that, FTO, CTOs, whatever acronym you want to use. And it's good to use those individuals that's been in those kind of battles, because the last thing you want for a new officer, new cadet, new anything that comes in law enforcement is not to be ready for when that does happen. So while HR didn't want you to say it, the reality is that you were actually preparing that person. And if they couldn't handle it in the interview, what's going to happen when there are backup out on the street or in the prison or the jail or in the courthouse, wherever it is? Are they going to clam up, or they're going to say, you know what? This crazy guy that was on my panel years ago said, I'm going to be in an all-out scrap. So I've been waiting for this one time it's going to happen. I've been ready for it. So I applaud you for doing that, Randall. I mean, that's how it should be. We should be preparing people for the battles they're going to get into. Yeah. We don't want to say we're scaring them, but this is the reality. And going back to mental health traumas, this is what I want viewers, especially that are not in law enforcement, to understand, is that these are what law enforcement officers are thinking about. We're thinking about what battle we're going to get into. If you're not law enforcement, you don't have to worry about that. And don't think you should have to worry about that. That's not your job. If your job is in accounting, you don't need to be worried about who am I going to get in a fight with. I mean, you shouldn't worry about that. But law enforcement, you're going into somebody's house, for example, you're telling them to sit down, stop talking. This is my time to talk. I'm going to figure out this solution since I'm here. And that's going to cause you to get into some fights, but you have to have that mentality. And that's the kind of things why we say we stay stressed out, or we say we burn out quickly. Always. This is why.
Always. So I ran for sheriff here in Jefferson County this last election. Mm-hmm. And during one of my little meet and greets in the community, homeowner came up and they talked about, they went out because all the trauma, we had all that crap going on. And then we got kids robbing people at gunpoint in the cities, Detroit, Chicago, and these places, just going up and carjacking them. And the homeowner talked about, I went out and bought a handgun. It was a elderly couple, probably maybe in their 60s. Well, I shouldn't say that's elderly. That's about my age. So I'm middle-aged now, right? 60 is the new middle age.
But you stay in shape, though. So that's the important part.
But so we're talking about it, and they said they went out and bought a handgun, and they went to the range, they got qualified. And so we're talking about it. He says, and I keep the first 3 rounds are blanks. And it just went silent. And I said, excuse me? They said, we have blanks in it because all we want to do is scare them. And I looked at it, and the people that are out there at the event with me know me pretty well. And I'm a hand weapon guy, so I always have weapons ready to go.
Right.
And I looked at him and I said, well, let me ask you, do you think the guy breaking into your house with a gun is carrying blanks? And he stopped. He said, probably not. And said, so if you shoot blanks at him, do you think he's going to wonder if they're blanks or just that you're a bad shot? And him and his wife got up and walked away. But that's the reality. That's the mentality that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. If I'm out with, my daughter, adult daughter, when she's younger, her and I, we'd go to the hardware store and stuff, and together, or the bookstore, or wherever we're out running around. She's my little sidekick, and she's looking at some woman's makeup and talking about how phony this woman is. And woman didn't even register to me. I'm looking at her boyfriend, he's like the bulldog going through. He's got that tank top shirt on. He's all buff. And I'm looking at him, ready to take my glasses off and put them away because this guy's looking for a fight. And she said something about the girl, and I said, I didn't even notice her. I'm looking at him. She goes, she didn't notice him.
Yeah.
But you look at the mentality. When we go on trips, we've got some friends we do a lot of traveling with, Puerto Vallarta, different places we've been. We get there. How many people that are non-law enforcement get out and walk the venue? They know where the exit points are. They know where the egress. They know the ins and outs. How many walk in the business and they're checking out their surroundings? You take public transportation. I'm looking for the exits and who's the threat, who's going to be a problem if it gets bad, and who I keep an eye on. Most people outside law enforcement don't grasp that. We're always on alert. And some of it may be personal. Some of it may be professional. I know a lot of people who have retired from law enforcement have slowly given up those skills, not deliberately just let them go, but they've kind of quit worrying about it. I carry more off duty in the past 6-8 years than I have in all my years. I didn't carry a lot off duty when I was younger. I didn't worry about it. But as time was going on, I'm like, more and more, I'm carrying more. And how many law enforcement are like that? How many, not to make it sound that way, but sleep with a gun near their bed? It's a challenge sometimes, but, like we started off, the tough conversations, how do we deal with this and how do we put it aside? It's like I said, the break. Me, I like to go work out. I'm not working out now, recovering from shoulder surgery, but going to the gym is a good decompression. I like going early in the morning. When I get there at the gym lately, I'm the young guy in the gym. There's a bunch of guys in their 70s and 80s making me look bad. But, the workouts, I like to go fishing. And my buddy that I go fishing with there's 5 guys. One's a retired cop, sergeant for Lakewood PD, my brother-in-law, retired Army guy, retired general manager for Sears, my buddy Joel. He was working for Tesla, and then myself. And only 2 of us fish. The others just kind of hang around the campsite or hike. And Joel gets out there and does fly fishing. No, my wife bought me a collapsible hammock so I can fold that thing out right on the shore, fishing rod in one. Don't worry about the bait, just the rod, okay? Then the cooler and snacks on the other side. I don't even have to get up. I sit there all day. So what do we do to decompress? What do we do with that? I like to read. How many people have hobbies? I don't care if somebody goes out and collects stamps or builds miniature, builds model cars. I like to do woodwork and even yard work. It's a no-brainer. You can get out. And the other thing I always recommend to new officers, find friends outside of law enforcement.
Oof, I've heard that a few times now on a few last couple of guests have said the same exact thing, but yeah, keep going. Yes. Go ahead.
Don't. It just, because then you eat it, you sleep it, you breathe it. It gets in you. It's just like being in the Marine Corps, being in the military. You're around that all the time. And, the big difference, they say, one of the big difference, first I ask you, what's the big difference between the Marine Corps, the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force? What makes them so different?
To me, on the outside looking in, I just say the logo, but.
Well, so the Air Force, the Army, and the Navy all have a football team. The Marine Corps is too busy protecting the country to worry about a quarterback.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, though. I mean, yeah, I didn't think about that. They don't have anything like that.
But in bottom line, they all do the same job.
Correct.
They're there to protect the country, uphold our Constitution. What makes the Marine Corps different is it's ingrained. It gets into our blood. They started that esprit de corps starts, and you can't get it out of us. They say a Marine, once a Marine, always a Marine. And no. Well, yeah, it is. Everything, my shirts, my coffee cups, everybody gets me Marine Corps stuff. They don't know what to get me. But you think about that mentality. You can't get that out of me. I walk in a room, I'm a Marine, I'm a career law enforcement, just the way I carry myself.
Correct.
When our daughter was starting school, elementary school, walk in a room or sitting there, and we meet one of the other mothers and her daughter, and I'm looking at her, I said, so what's your husband do? She says, why? I said, well, either he's an ex-con or he's a cop. And she says, yeah, he's a cop. It's just by the way he carries himself.
Yeah.
And it's not it's not the best icebreaker with a parent. You're just mean saying your husband looks like a crook.
Like, what? Where's he going with this? Trust me, I'm going somewhere with this one.
But again, like you said, you look at those tough conversations we have to have with ourselves, with those around us, our families, the sacrifice. It's like phones going off all the time, when we're on call. For years, I've carried 2 cell phones, a personal one, and I always keep business separate. You don't mix the two, especially with cell phone. They subpoena your phone, you're done. So I always have 2 cell phones. And one time you and I were talking earlier about having a pager. I was carrying 2 cell phones, a pager, and back then it was the Nextel. It was easy. Nextels are great.
Yeah.
But look at how things have changed, like you said about the sheepdog. And as leaders and coaches in the public speaking we do, one of the concepts I use when I go out and I do some speaking, and by all means, use this if it works for you. I walk in and I carry a racquetball, and I'll hold the racquetball, and I've actually got something that's posted on LinkedIn where I talk about it. And I hold the racquetball, and I'll toss it around, and I'll talk to the people in the room, and I say, how many of you are athletes? How many of you said, I said, this is just a soft racquetball, it won't hurt you. How many of you are athletes? How many play football, baseball, racquetball, anything like that? So do you think you can catch this when I throw it at you? And I'll start looking around the room and make eye contact. And try this sometime. Take that racquetball and look around the room. I've got this one sitting right here on my desk.
Okay.
But I'll tell them, I say, you think you can catch it? You think you're fast enough to catch it when I throw it? and then I'll set it down. And I'll tell them, said, well, I'm not going to throw it at you. But someday, somewhere, somebody's going to throw something at you. And you're not going to see it coming. You got to be aware of it, keep your head on a swivel. And it's unfortunate to have to ingrain that in them. But as a leader, like you said, preparing them. But on the other side, when I was a coordinator for the peer support, people would come in. And in Colorado, and I don't know about other states, a number of years ago, Colorado statute was put in place where the peer support programs for public service, like law enforcement, firefighters, paramedics, if they were managed by a licensed mental health, like a psychologist, psychiatrist, were confidential in nature. So if somebody came to me in a peer support capacity and they told me something, I could never be compelled to disclose it in a court unless it was homicide or something like that, or the person agreed to allow me to speak to it. But people came in and they talked to me about stuff I didn't need to know about their fertility issues. I didn't need to know about their marital issues.
Yeah,
but
they
you
opened
look
up.
at them, but you look at what they bring in. You look at what people look at your peers, and I'm sure you look around it. And I'll tell you up front, I've fought some demons. I've had some very dark days, and I've had to seek help because going back, like I said, 11 years old. And then my wife worked at a bank, and there's nothing I could do for her. And do I put myself in those positions? Do I put myself at risk? Am I willing, not necessarily willing, but do I even give it a thought, the danger that we put ourselves in? We're quick. We laugh and joke about the Marines running into starting the fight, or if there's a gunfight, just like firefighters. Who in their right mind runs into a burning building? Not me.
Not me.
If it's burning, I'm going the other direction.
They got me. They got me on that one. I can't. In polyester uniform, I especially ain't running inside a burning building.
No, stick to you like a new suit.
Yes.
But no, so you think about some of the things, Michael, and the challenges, and it's like the work you're doing. I look had I thought about some of this at your age, had I thought about the guidance, things might have been a little bit different. But at that time in my life, it was not a discussion. We've got to be more well-rounded, more balanced. In conversations I have with staff members, I say, growing up as a white male with a Japanese Buddhist upbringing in a predominantly middle-class white neighborhood here in the Denver area, I have no idea what challenges you may have faced. I have a buddy I go and have coffee with periodically, big, burly, nasty-looking, tattooed, cigar-smoking, Harley riding. He was a bounty hunter, bail bondsman. He does leg press with like 1,000 pounds, named Jesse. Oof. And he will tell you he's Mexican-American Indian. I go have coffee with him, and we have some real conversations. We talk about the gangbangers that we used to have to deal with. He grew up in the projects where I went to school. And we grew up we went to high school together, playing football. He talks about us de-pantsing him when we were in high school. I don't remember that. You can't do that anymore. You get in trouble for that anymore.
Yeah.
But you look at the way it's changed, and even Jesse and I talked that there is no, even with the gangs and the issues back then, we had what they were known as the Inca Boys. But there was a code. There was certain things you didn't do. You didn't mess with certain things. And now we get so inundated, and then the social media, how do you get away from it? Mm-hmm. Another thing I like to do in the classroom is we're going to do a look at my phone, walk in the room and say, oh, hold it. Deliberately look at my phone and said, I just wanted to be the first one to look at her phone. So everybody good? Let's do a little experiment, put it on mute, put it face down. Now that I was the first one that did it, we're good, right? Because invariably everybody's looking at their phone. I've got mine over here. I got to call somebody back when we're done. But, you look at the technology and the leashes, and how do we get away from it? You have to detach. So hanging out with other cops, not the best way to do it.
Yeah, it's not. So while we're on that, I think this would be a good time to pivot into your book that's coming up, because I believe a lot of this, and I can just tell you from my own upbringing in law enforcement and business, as a lot of this mind shift starts with leadership.
Correct.
And not just managing your people, but leading them down
Correct.
a path to where they know how to de-stress. And
yes,
I always, whenever I talk at conferences, I always mess around with the chiefs or sheriffs. I'm like, whose job is it to make your staff happy? And out of, let's say 200, one person or two people may raise their hand. I'm like, you're right. But whose job is it to create a happy environment? And the same 2 or 3 people, I'm like, okay, now you're wrong. You got to create the environment to allow your people to grow and to succeed. Yep. You can't force them to do it, but you at least have to let them know there's an option out there. So when you're telling us all this about make sure you get with the right friends, make sure you have things you can de-stress from the leadership standpoint, how do we incorporate that into building our people so we're not just managing them to get through their career?
Well, I think part of it has to be they have to be vulnerable themselves. I can't remember. There's an individual out there. I'll have to get her name. I'll send it to you. Private sector. She's done some TED Talks on vulnerability and so on like that. And as a leader, you've got to be willing to have people tell you or tell you off. And if you can't encourage that environment where people are comfortable to say what's going on, I don't know how many times I've told people, by all means, they'll come in, they see me, they close the door. I've got officers I work with now, and they'll call me up and they tell me how it really is. And that's the only way we're going to make it better. And one of the unfortunate things I've seen, and this is what I talk about in the book on It's About Leadership, Not Management, is so I also, one of my previous lives, before going to work where I'm at now, I used to teach college classes. I was adjunct college faculty, and I would teach a graduate level management course, and that's planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. And we get into a discussion about it. I say, well, management is not leadership. I said, you can have leadership in the community. You can have leadership in your family, in a religious group. Like I do in the lodge, you've got leadership. But true leadership is about inspiring others. One of the things that the company I've set up, Doizaki and Leadership, the emphasis is about being an authentic and inspirational leader, is being true and being willing to have somebody come in and tell you what they think and encourage ideas. I've actually, even in my career, I've had the chief tell me point blank, he says, well, I don't need your opinion. I didn't ask for it. You don't need to worry about that. It said, so if you're encouraging that, how are you going to have a positive work culture and climate? You're not.
Nope.
If people, so there's a posting on LinkedIn I recently did. I can't remember. It was one of those group discussions, and they were talking about patting somebody in the back. They said, it's great if you're patting them back, but are they worried where your other hand is? I said, frequently you see people give somebody a pat on the back, but the other one's up here. Yeah, you're doing great, but this one's going to slap you. You screw up. Do good, but don't forget this one. So it doesn't. And then I've seen the feel-good gestures where they will come in and they say, oh, well, we're going to do this. Years ago, before I went to law enforcement, the company I was working for was a manager for a fire water restoration company. And we had a major job, big job. The insurance company was thrilled. We finished a week in advance, under budget. And the owners of the company wanted to do something special for the employees. So they come to me as manager and say, Randy, we want to, what do you think if we get them all gift cards, so like King Soopers or something? I said, that's impersonal. If you're going to do something, take them out to dinner.
Right.
Take the whole crew to dinner. So even for me with the sheriff's office, that carried on. And at one point, I had 60 staff members assigned to me.
Wow. Dang.
Invited all of them and their families to our house for a get-together, little potluck thing out in the back patio. We got a big patio area out back. And to this day, Michael, I can't tell you who came and who brought what. Every time I turn around, somebody else is there. When'd you get home? We've been here for a bit, LT. I'm like, okay. So I planned this. This got me in trouble with my lovely wife, very patient lady. So she's asking, we're planning. I said, well, how many people? I said, well, I got 60 staff. She said, what do you mean 60 people? And their families? Yeah. maybe 120, maybe 150 people. I don't know. It took us days to clear out the house because we have more food. Everybody was a potluck type thing.
Yeah. People always bring a lot for potlucks, always.
Yeah, and we ran out of room, and people coming and going. But the teams remembered that, and in my book, I talk about getting to know your team. Originally, when I started writing this book, probably 10, 15 years ago, as a sergeant, I started writing because I wanted to help mentor and guide new sergeants coming in. And originally, I had in there crack a cold one with the troops. Now, to make it more climate, like we said, things have changed, so I've reworded that a little bit. But the idea is sit down, have a cup of coffee, or crack a cold one with the troops. But when I was a lieutenant in the jail, I always had a pot of coffee on, and my coffee was the kind you could put a spoon in and it would stand up. If I can see through it, it's tea. I drink dark beer, dark coffee, and 100 proof whiskey.
Yeah.
Don't mess around with weak stuff around. But everybody come by, have a cup of coffee, and talk about things. That's how I found out what's going on with the team. Be open to those conversations. Be willing to have somebody tell you screwed up. Be willing to have somebody tell you that that's not necessarily a mistake, but probably not the best. I always tell the troops when they come in, I made a mistake. I said, it happened once. It happens twice, it becomes a mistake. If the place isn't burning down and nobody's dying, there goes that fire thing again, burning down because I'm going the other way. But if it's not burning down and nobody's dying, we can step back and take a breath. We are too quick to jump in. You may have seen it yourself. I know I've experienced it. I've had to counsel others on it. Somebody stumbles, and the first thing a supervisor does is jump on him. In the classroom, and I've seen other people doing the same thing. It's like, I've seen people do more of the same stuff I've been doing for years. I'll put math problems on the board. I'll put like 4 math problems, 9 times 1, 9 times 2, 9 times 3. And I always make 9 times 1 is 10. And I turn to the class and I said, what do you notice first? He said, well, the first one's wrong. I said, but the other 3 are right. I said, he's either that or your lieutenant's stupid. Just can't do math. I am a Marine. My degree does not involve math. But you look at that, and I said, that's the first thing we have. And I said, so why are we focusing on 1? It's a minor error, something we can work with, we can correct. But you start looking at how you develop that, and that conversation, to me, goes back to the experience in the Marine Corps. They incorporate you. They bring you in. You're part of the camaraderie. And this probably, in some settings, it is not user-friendly or acceptable to say the indoctrination into a military unit from one to the other involves a lot of physical contact. I got jumped in when I went from one unit to the next. I got jumped by 24 Marines. And that's how they dealt with it. I'm not saying that's good or bad. But you look at the climate in which these organizations bring people in. And even an article that I just posted on LinkedIn that I'm talking about, how we engage these people. It should start up front. It should start at that interview process. And once you bring them in, how many organizations, and I see it happen with us, is we bring somebody in and we just kind of put them through training and throw them out to the wolves. I try to make it a point. I run the FTO, the Field Training Officer program for my current employer, and I assign the officers to a training officer to help them develop certain skills. If they're weak in this area, identify that. And then as they're going through phase 1, they come back and we discuss how they did. We tweak phase 2. Then we tweak phase 3. That if they're weak in that, we build on it. And then we bring in, we have conversations. But I'll use on a personal side, I'll give you 2 examples that I've seen that are kind of challenging. One, we had a Black female Muslim apply for a position. And when she was interviewing, she asked about her wearing her hijab. And I was raised Buddhist. I have no idea, no concept of the significance. So we hired her. She did a great job. She moved into a different position. And I asked her later, why did she feel compelled to even bring that up? She said, because she's been challenged on it before. But for her to even have to ask that made me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I opened it up. I wanted to know. We have individuals with different lifestyles or different upbringings. We had another one, a young black female, very young, probably in her 20s, early 20s, and I had to talk to her about the challenges she faced when she was dealing with different people in different settings. And it's a tough conversation, but we've got to be willing, coming in as the white male raised in a Japanese Buddhist home, got to be open to have those conversations. Got to be willing to open the door and take a hit. I've had people tell me things that made me very uncomfortable. But on the other side of it, different example, we had an officer whose wife ended up in the hospital and she was intubated, breathing issues, restriction.
Right.
I was a sergeant at the time. He called in just to give us an update, and I'm talking to him. I'm in the lieutenant's office when he called me. And the lieutenant starts talking to him about his leave. Lieutenant saying, well, we'll take care of this. We need that so we can get this done, and so on and so on. They said, well, you go ahead and take care. Just keep me posted. Let me know if you and the boys, because he had 2 teenage boys, if you guys need anything. Both families are out of state and so on. And got off the phone. I turned to the lieutenant and said, Lieutenant, that was wrong. The lieutenant's like, what do you mean, wrong? I said, you should not have asked or even talked to him about his leave. If you were in his position and your significant other is laying in the hospital intubated, are you even thinking about your freaking time?
No, we'll figure it out later.
I said, why? Why did you even ask that? But for me as a sergeant to challenge the lieutenant about that action, that's the kind of relationship that helps. So when the officer checked in later, the lieutenant apologized. Lieutenant just said, hey, look, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to come. That was inappropriate, and made up for it. So the lieutenant learned from that.
Right.
The officer felt better about it later.
Absolutely.
The different, having the coffee, having the conversations, laughing and joking, and some camaraderie. There's got to be some. I make a lot of fun, like I said with you, about my age, my sign of wisdom here that I've earned that gray.
the gray hairs.
Yeah, and all of this that they shaved it off in the Marine Corps, just never grew back. But you look at the things, and if we can't make fun of ourselves and laugh and joke and poke, and as a lieutenant, I've had to admit my mistakes. I've had to admit when I've stumbled. And if we're not willing to do that and have those tough conversations and bring it up, then the organization is not going to succeed. It's going to become stagnant, and people leave because of the environment, not always the pay.
Oh, that's a given. You are 100% right about that. People definitely, and I've been talking about that before. I mean, as far as the business goes and leadership speaking goes, for 6 years, I've been talking about that because, and it's funny because as I think about like how long you've been instructing, you've been talking about it as well for decades. But it's like when I bring it up to people now, they're still kind of confused. Like, what do you mean they left because bad leadership, or they left because I was like, no, it wasn't. I'm like, you can't beat the studies. Like the data shows, the exit surveys show that people are leaving because of a personality versus the benefits of the job itself. So no, you're right. So as we get close, and I told you I would keep this to an hour, and I always promise all my guests that, and obviously I do it for the viewers as well, because I want to make sure that if you've been driving to work, you've had a chance to listen to the podcast, you've been able to, if you're watching on YouTube or you're watching the playback on the video side, you're able to see it somewhere, but within an hour span, because most of us, if we have to commute, we usually don't go further than that, but it gives you enough time to go back and watch it a few times. So Randall, we covered so much stuff, and I know that we can keep going, and I will have you on again, so the guests don't think that some of the knowledge that they didn't hear about, but I do want people to know, in the meantime, all the stuff that you talked about, if someone was trying to find you, where would they go?
The best place to reach me would be through LinkedIn. I haven't got the website set up yet. I'm working on that now. But yeah, reach me through LinkedIn.
Yeah, and you're pretty active.
Yeah, I try to be. Yeah. I like to get outside my comfort zone and learn from others.
Yeah, no, but and that I can tell you, like I said, most people know, if you listen to my podcast, where most of the people I've met my guests, especially, it's been through LinkedIn, whether me reaching out to them or they're reaching out to me, because LinkedIn is a professional network that does promote these kind of activities, and it's about adaptability. But LinkedIn has created something that has kept its integrity as far as what it's driven for. It hasn't fallen off yet, and I don't think it will, because there's so many other platforms that can handle those other things that people want to post about. And I think LinkedIn's kind of stayed away. So that's good. So guys, if you look for Randall, reach out to him through LinkedIn. I can tell you, but once again, I know he is active. Like, even if he says he's not that active, he's actually more active than the average user that I've seen, which is very good. So if you're looking for that kind of mentorship, coaching, if you're trying to understand when his book comes out, make sure you reach out, make sure you follow him, because I know he will post, and I'll make sure I share it on my side. But any final words for the viewers?
I appreciate your time, and it's all about learning. Even in the difference in decade or so, whatever we've got between us, it's always good to have that perspective from others. We got to keep learning and growing. I read. I tell our officers to write better reports, read. To become a better communicator, read. To become a better leader, read, and take some ownership and take some chances. But no, it's always good to chat with you, sir.
I appreciate you coming on. And hey, guys, you heard it. Reading is definitely fundamental. I didn't realize that until my 20s. And mind you, I already had a bachelor's degree. I've already been through 2 police academy. Well, I've been to police academy, border patrol academy, and I still didn't understand the power of reading until I started to do it. And now everything I've done has moved so much quicker, so much efficiently, so much more effectively, because I started to read. So, Randall, those are really good parting words, because a lot of our viewers, and I can tell you, me growing up law enforcement, that wasn't what I thought about. Now, especially now, that I'd rather scroll through like everybody else through TikTok or IG or some whatever stuff, because it's easier. But if I'm trying to develop my brain and become a better person, I have to read. So I understand my priorities, but you're right. And that's definitely something that I don't think we're ever going to get away from, whether it's reading actual books or even listening to audio books, which can be efficient, especially during working out. But I think you're 100% right. That's something that people always have to do. So great final words, guys. Reach out to Randall through LinkedIn. Keep an eye out for his book. But as usual, guys, these shows, these episodes are always designed to make you better. It's designed to make you understand you have people out here that want to see you grow. We want to see you succeed. We want to see you get better, because we've all experienced things that we don't want you to repeat. There's no point to go through the same hard trial and tribulation if you don't have to. And hearing the stories and preparing your mind for the things that can come will help you overcome them a lot easier, versus just hitting that wall blindly. Trust me, everybody hits that wall. It just depends on if you're looking at it or if you just smack into it without realizing it. But that wall will hit you no matter what. So
yes, it will.
Yeah. And it hurts. It hurts all the time, but it hurts a little bit more when you don't see it coming. It hurts a little bit more then. So,
and when everybody's laughing at you.
Yeah, and people will laugh. And nowadays they take the video, so they have the video evidence to take it back. But guys, that's why we do this show, because we want to see you grow. We want to see you humanize. We want the people that aren't in law enforcement to understand that each person that comes on this show is different. No matter if we have a decade apart or if we have 30 minutes apart, we all have different life experiences that people can benefit from. And we're on here because we believe in helping others. We believe in serving. We believe in continuing the mission, just in a different way. Not saying it's right or wrong, but it's just another way to impact people in this world. So guys, thank you. Thank you for watching. Oh, hit my microphone. My bad, guys. I got too excited. Thank you for listening and being part of the show. Make sure you guys comment, share, like, reach out to Randall, reach out to me if you guys like what you heard. We'll definitely like to bring more guests on, especially like Randall. One day we will have multiple guests. We had it in one show so far, but as I conceptualize even more, folks, I will tell you that is coming. So that's a little bit of a teaser to get you guys excited on some of the future episodes we have. But once again, thank you guys. Enjoy your day. Be safe out there. If you need anything, reach out. Have a good one, guys.
You've been listening to the LEO First Podcast. Michael has been in law enforcement since 2005. He's worked for 3 law enforcement agencies in 3 different states. He's a professional speaker who travels the country teaching about leadership development and self-awareness. And he's the author of a book called Greatness Beyond the Badge, The 3 Key Principles for Self-Awareness. It's Michael's passion to bring law enforcement members' stories to the front, so you get the real and raw take. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with Michael on YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Michael Laidler, on Twitter at Michael A. Laidler, on Facebook at Michael Laidler Leadership. Send an email to michael@michaelalaidler.com and hit the website at michaelalaidler.com. See you next time on the LEO First Podcast.